Your world is waiting, but first you have to access it. Welcome to the Joshua Roy Show. We don't do fluff, we do freedom. Real talk on mindset, cutting edge coaching techniques, and the hidden frameworks for lasting change. If you're ready to move from being stuck to becoming the architect of your life, you're ready for this. Hit subscribe. Let's get to work. Hey, how you going, everyone? Welcome today to this episode of the podcast. I've got something really exciting for you today. You see, I've covered a lot of topics over the year, as you can imagine, having taught hundreds of webinars. And one of the topics that I've gone into is the topic of trauma. And so what you're going to hear me doing here today is talking about trauma. How do we release trauma from the body?
Yesterday, you talked about us having a trauma and working through the trauma. Of course, after many years, there may be several traumas. My question was, do you start with a trauma that is closest to you in time to try to work out, or one that's upsetting you more? Like, do you want to get rid of something that you're in the middle of, or get rid of or work on something that's closest to you in time you have to deal with right now? Or is it more important to go back to that childhood, those ones in childhood, and work with them first? Where do you?
So all trauma is a challenge for us, and yes. So my answer is yes to both of those questions. You can work on the most recent trauma, or you can work on the first trauma. Which one's going to be more powerful? The earlier the memory of the trauma, probably the more pervasive and powerful the change will be, simply because you've been carrying that trauma for longer. So you're looking at bigger change when you've got earlier trauma. However, any trauma you work with is a trauma worked with. And any repressed emotion released is a repressed emotion you no longer have to carry as baggage for your life. So it's all good. I do like personally working with early trauma, simply because people see the results really rapidly. Like because they've been carrying it for so long, it's a big shift or change. However, if there's a recent trauma, you might find that there's linkages between that trauma and earlier trauma. And so if you loosen up a recent trauma, it may help you as you go and work with those other traumas, which were when you were younger. Does that answer your question?
Yes.
It's a very simple answer. I'd love to go into trauma a little bit more with you, perhaps, just to give you a bit more of an idea. I didn't go into it fully yesterday, but when we go through trauma, I'll draw it up. I'll draw what happens when we go through a trauma or a traumatic incident. So what we have is equilibrium or homeostasis. Homeostasis means everything's fine. We're happy, we're just going along normal, neutral, you could say. Homeostasis, we're not anxious, we're not worried, we're not stressed. We may not have high positive emotions either. We're just sort of neutral. Now, what happens with a trauma is it elevates us in this condition of stress, worry, anxiety. And what happens is our nervous system goes into a flight response. This is trauma. So here we are, we go up to this elevated peak. Now, it's interesting, when we get to a trauma or the peak of a trauma, one of two things happens. Either we live or we die. So when we're going into a trauma, your unconscious mind, it's designed for survival. I've said this many times, it's actually not designed to make you happy. So it's designed for survival. And so when we go into this traumatic state, your nervous system thinks, I've got to keep you alive. So it's either one of two things is going to happen. You're going to live or you're going to die. And so at the peak of the trauma, that's what's going on. Now, just before we get to that peak of the trauma, we call that trauma -1. What your nervous system does with that trauma. Who's seen the latest Ghostbusters? Anyone seen that little new movie? The new Ghostbuster? It was quite good, actually. It brought back some memories of the original Ghostbusters. I think there was Ghostbusters 1 and 2, and now we've got there was then the women's Ghostbusters, and now we've got a new rendition of Ghostbusters. We've got like the next generation Ghostbusters. Now, with Ghostbusters, when there's a ghost that's floating around the city harassing people, what they had is a little gun that looked like a vacuum cleaner. And they would actually suck the ghost into this thing, and the ghost would go into this little capsule. It was like a vacuum, and it'd be contained in there. Think about that little capsule when you think about trauma. Because your nervous system, when you're young, when you're a child, doesn't have the tools to deal with trauma, has no idea what to do with these emotions. I mean, this is an elevated state where you're either going to live or die. So this is trauma at its worst. Now, because it doesn't know what to do, your nervous system protects you. Your nervous system protects you by encapsulating that trauma. And we get what's called a repressed or a trapped memory of trauma. And so that's the box here. So imagine we've got this little box here. That's where the trauma is encapsulated. And what your nervous system will do is it will put it in a part of the body for safekeeping. Now, it could send it to your knee or to your liver or to another part of the body. Now, later on in life, guess what happens? Well, if you haven't dealt with that trauma, if you haven't released the repressed emotion or the repressed or trapped emotions, you haven't released them, then that trauma will come back in the form of a disease or a sickness or a cancer or something else in your life. So that can happen, very much happen. If you listen to a woman by the name of Louise Hay, she talks about healing the body with the mind, and she uses affirmations to do that. So she teaches people that certain affirmations actually help you by releasing these trapped or repressed emotions. And as you repeat the words, those emotions come out, they come out. And once you release them, you no longer have to carry them, which means you no longer need the injury in that part of your body. You can let go of it, you can get rid of it. And so the techniques that I do as well are once again, it's here to get that trapped emotion and release it. Now, if you've got a trauma in your life from when you're young and you're driving along in your car, sometimes this trauma will just pop up. It'll just pop up in your mind. You weren't thinking about it. You just listen to music, you're singing along, and suddenly this thought pops. Who's had that experience? Just hands up if you've had that experience. What your unconscious mind's really saying is deal with this. We've got this repressed emotion. It's trapped in our body. Deal with it. And what we tend to do is we tend to stuff it down. We tend to go and eat a big feed, or we tend to do something to stuff that emotion, push it back down, and to push it back away, because it was away from our thoughts. We didn't want to think about it. We don't want to think about it now. We push it away. It's encased. We think we're safe. The trouble is we're not safe. And your unconscious mind is actually bringing that thought up to help you. But you didn't know what to do with it. You didn't have the tools. So through the emotional clearing processes, what we do is we open these Pandora's boxes, so to speak, and we release those emotions. Once they're released, we can go back.
I also got into understanding
life
some
can
stuff
go
that
on.
had
we can
been
be okay.
suppressed.
And
so it makes
what's
a lot
more,
of
we
yes.
don't no longer have
Yeah,
this.
wonderful. Excellent. Thanks, Sharon. So,
no
what we did yesterday was we opened the box and we let that out. We released it, to the universe, and hopefully those traumas don't need to be there. They don't need to impact us in less than positive ways.
And so yesterday, when you took us through that exercise, and I remembered an exceedingly happy occasion, I also got into understanding some stuff that had been suppressed.
Yeah, wonderful. Excellent. Thanks, Sharon. So, what we did yesterday was we opened the box and we let that out. We released it, to the universe, and hopefully those traumas don't need to be there. They don't need to impact us in less than positive ways. So thanks, Sharon. Great question. And it opened up a bit of a discussion. Is this helpful for others? Who got something out of that? Just the description of how trauma sits in the body. Great. So thanks, Sharon. Is there any other questions, Sharon?
Hello.
Hey, how you doing?
My question is around the same thing with trauma.
Right.
So it's more about the techniques that you walked us through in a couple of your sessions to
Yep.
overcome the trauma and also procrastination. And you
Mhm.
also mentioned about healthy food and habits to help with that. So along the same thing that you talked with, you also gave us techniques and suggested food. If you can just go over that again, please.
So when it comes to any technique or anything that I do or teach, what we've got to realize is that repetition is the mother of all skill. That to get good at anything, we need to repeat something. So what I did was I went and I did these emotional clearing processes, not once or twice, but I just threw myself in and I did it like 30 times. I started waking up every morning and I had a recording and I would just listen to it over and over again. And if you have a look, I sent out the recording from yesterday. You could actually fast forward it to the bit where we do the actual exercise and you could go over that again. And it's a good thing to do. I really recommend you go over that a few times because what will happen is as you repeat that, the grooves will go deeper. The information will go deeper into your unconscious mind. And you'll find that those changes will get more pervasive and permanent the more you do it. So that's what I would recommend is go over it a few times. What we've got to understand is that trauma is and the repressed emotions left from trauma are very stubborn. They don't actually want to leave. They want to stay there. The memory of that. It never, you see, your unconscious mind never wants that to happen to you again. And so your unconscious mind says, well, I'll remember that and we'll keep you safe. And maybe, hopefully that will never happen again. And so everywhere you go in life, you carry this trauma with you as if it's there and it's there preventing you from ever getting into a situation that's traumatic again. But the trouble is, let's say the trauma was a rejection, or let's say the trauma was a marriage breakdown. If you keep that trauma and you hang on to that and it's always there in front of you, then you can't ever have a relationship again because a relationship equals pain according to the way your unconscious mind processed the trauma. But relationships don't equal pain. That relationship equaled pain. And sometimes what we do is we stereotype or we allow one thought or idea to permeate our life and to, it spills over into other areas of our life. It shouldn't. It doesn't need to. And in that way, we inhibit ourselves, we limit ourselves, we prevent ourselves from moving out into the world and taking chances. Once bitten, twice shy. And so sometimes we don't put ourselves out there. We don't date people because we've been hurt or we've been traumatized or felt the trauma of a past breakup or the hurt from that. And so we're going to realize that we need to deal with that if we ever want to have success and a wonderful life. We're going to deal with that trauma. We've got to realize that the past doesn't equal the future, and that one situation and that one person doesn't represent the whole gender or doesn't represent the whole human race. That's just one individual. And now what we do is we look at the next individual and we filter them through the past experiences. And this is how trauma gets in our way and it puts blinders on us. So we're looking through the lens of these traumas in our life and trying to see clearly. But the trouble is our vision is tainted by all these traumas. And so getting rid of the traumas allows us to see clearly again. And we're able to just see people and accept them as they are and not just fly off the handle if they do one behavior or action that reminds us of somebody that hurt us. Instead of feeling less than positive emotions and acting irrationally towards that person, we can process it differently and say, oh, wait a minute, that's not my father or that's not my uncle, that's somebody else. And that's okay. And they might have a similar behavior or similar nuance or a similar gesture or a similar way of standing or doing things or speaking, but that's not them. And once we get that, once we understand that, then we put things in a proper perspective and we can let those traumas go and they can stop inhibiting us from having the desired life that we want. Does that make sense? It's sort of a long-winded way to get through it, but that's really what we're doing. We're wanting to have a better life. We're wanting to have a happier life. Traumas keep you unhappy and keep you stuck. Traumas can lead to depression. So all all of this comes about from trauma. So we're wanting to release that so that we can enjoy a better quality of life. Now, I'm not saying to be ignorant, because certainly you're still going to always have your wits about you. And certainly if there are triggers that go off, you want to be aware of that and alert to it. But at the same time, we've got to be careful of throwing everyone into the same basket. We've got to be able to open ourselves up to possibilities. Otherwise, how can you get in a relationship? How can you improve or progress in your life? You just can't. There is no progress. So that's, I don't know what else you want me to say about trauma, only to say that we can release the trapped or repressed emotions. And there's emotional clearing techniques to do that. I did a technique yesterday, which was called the gift. And next week on Monday, I'm going to do another webinar for the US. I'm doing one on Thursday afternoon or evening for Australia, for people here. Next Monday, I'm going to do one for those in the US. I think it'll be 5 a.m. Brisbane time. So it's a bit early for the people over here, unless they're really keen. But what I'll do is I'll do a different emotional clearing technique. And what you realize there is that there's not just one way to do it. There's many different ways to clear techniques out, to clear repressed or trapped emotions out, many different ways to do it. And so I'll do a different one. I'll probably do something like either the Ironman process. I'll probably do the grey room. The grey room's a really good one. Okay, so if you are available, come to that one and you'll get a different technique. And the idea is I like the range and the variety. What's good about that is that it keeps you on your toes and it keeps you learning. If you keep doing the same thing, what can happen is the process can become dilated over time. So if you do the same one over and over, it becomes dilated. So it's good to switch it up a bit and use something different.
Your commitment to yourself should be to discover who you really are. Unlock your incredible self and unleash that on the world. So thanks for being here today. Thanks for spending some time with me, and look forward to seeing you at the next episode.